I'm getting rid of it. I'm redoing this. This is stupid. This doesn't even work. Don't like it. Start over. Let's talk intercooler and oil cooler today. Two of the final radiators we need to install, the most important radiators to keep the engine cool in this small engine bay of the E30. We're going to install, we're going to plumb, we're going to see how big of a fan we can fit behind the radiator and where especially it will fit. Guys, stay tuned. This is going to be a good one. Behind me is the intercooler mock-up installation for where I think it should go behind the E30 Valence. And as you can see, I have marked up the Valence as to where I think it needs to be modified in order to not only fit correctly without modification for sure, but also how to get the maximum amount of airflow. Remember, this whole area is going to be covered by a bumper. So I'm trying to limit as best as I can that bumper covering up most of the airflow, but it's going to be really difficult. Now remember, this is an MTech 2 E30, which means now I have the MTech 2 kit on top of that, on top of this Valence to deal with as well. So let's take a quick look at how the bumper is going to fit, the MTech 2 Valence rather, is going to fit underneath the bumper, and if there's going to be any modifications to that, or if I decide to leave it stock looking and still not sacrifice airflow on the lower end of that air dam. So this is kind of what it's going to look like when it's installed, and the only location for air intake on the intercooler is going to be down here. So there's two air slots here, and on the Valence you can see there's the existing air slot for the oil cooler, but there was no oil cooler ever on the C30, but that's where it should go. And then up here there is basically just a block of metal that's covering potential airflow. So I'm actually going to cut this out. The second place I'm going to cut out is up here underneath the lip, and not because of airflow, although there might be a small gain there. Really, it's for fitment, because I won't be able to push this Valence far enough to mount to its stock location on the core support without modifying this and getting it to fit. So let's take this off and see where the intercooler fits underneath. You can see here that the lower part of the Valence is really the lowest part of the intercooler. If I go any lower, then I could actually cause damage if it hits a bump or something. So I don't want to go too low because it's not going to afford me any additional gain. So this is the lowest I want to go with the intercooler. The mounts are right here. I'll show you the mounts and how I'm going to install this thing in a moment. But this right here would allow for at least half of the intercooler to be exposed to the incoming air, which is as good as I think I'm going to be able to get in an E30. So let's take this Valence off. And that's essentially what the intercooler installation is going to look like. So you can see I have two mounts underneath. These are actually screw-on rubber mounts. There's two locations up there for an M6 thread. I've actually screwed them on down here. If I remove them, you can see what they look like. They're basically just generic threads that you can get on McMaster. One side is threaded, one side is a stud. You put it in, and now you can create your mount below. And that's exactly what I plan to do on the lower part of this radiator core support, is to install lower radiator mounts for the intercooler there. And the upper is going to have another another mount right here coming off of the side. So I'm going to need to TIG weld onto the sides. That would allow this entire intercooler to be suspended by rubber mounting, which is what I'm primarily interested in. I do not want to hard mount it. The piping is going to come around and underneath, and it's going to pop through here, and it's going to go to the turbos for the charge pipe. On this side, it's also going to come down, around, up. It's going to pop through, and it's going to go through this modified charge tube with a, as you can see, there's a blow-off valve up here, but that's going to have to be modified and cut and re-welded to mate with the existing charge pipe that goes right into the intake. So what I need to do is I need to install and mount the intercooler first, then I can work on piping, figure out where I want to drill, and then start filling in all these holes to make this a nice shaved look of an engine bay. So let's talk about how to make these mounts. We start with the lower, and then we work to the upper. Once you get the lowers in, everything else falls into place. Let's start off with 1.5 inch steel angle, and how to make that? Start off with cardboard. let's try releasing this one more time. Much better. Now we need to do that. We've got the lower mounts placed, just tack welded for now. We got to get the upper mounts, and the upper mounts are going to be horizontal as opposed to vertical on the lower. We're going to have to create a mount on the top side of each of these sides of the intercooler, and we're going to be, it's going to end up screwing through a rubber isolator to the core support. So let's do that next. These that I've decided to use for the side are actually M6s. Here is a representation of a piece of aluminum that I had scored, and I'm going to end up welding it to the side, and that is going to end up getting bolted to the isolator that's going to be mounted horizontally, like this. It's going to be mounted right in there, and it's going to screw on, right? This is going to be threaded, it's going to screw right onto there. But I need to make a hole in this piece of cardboard so that I know exactly where I need to, number one, weld onto this, but also where the hole is going to live. It's pretty easy to figure out where the hole is going to be. It can be swagged, so it doesn't really need to be completely accurate, but they need to be the same from one side to the other. So what I wanted to do is I want to figure out overall where I'm going to need to mount this thing to get the right thickness. So it's actually probably going to be more like over here. And then figure out where the hole is going to be, which is probably going to be somewhere in that location. Okay guys, so you're gonna have to forgive me. I did finish the welds, but they are not my best work. In fact, I am really learning about how to do TIG welding, and it is an art. Aluminum TIG welding is hard to do. It takes a lot of practice. You need a lot of aluminum, a lot of gas. You gotta go through probably about 20 or 30 bottles before you're at least somewhat decent, and I haven't even gone through 1/3 of that. So, having said that, the welds are okay. They're strong, that's for sure. But both bracket ears are on, the holes are drilled, and now I can take this intercooler and install it right here, figure out where the holes are going to end up being drilled and tapped here, mount the isolators exactly where they need to be, and then the whole thing is just to set it on, throw it on, and it's good. So let's do that right now. So now we got our intercooler completely isolated and mounted on rubber isolators. Very, very nice. Now we need to figure out exactly where the cuts are on the valence. I know I kind of estimated here earlier, but I want to know exactly where the cuts are and minimize them as much as possible. If I don't have to cut this whole piece out underneath the bumper, I'm not going to cut it out because I want to keep as much of the strength of the valence and original look of the valence as possible, regardless of whether or not there's going to be an M-Tech 2 kit or a bumper in front of it. It's important to me that it remains as stock looking as possible. So far, so good. There is an interference right up in here in the corner, but the front up in here looks not so bad. Same thing down here. Looks like there's an interference at the bottom of the intercooler, right at the bottom of the valence, on just the corners. Not so much the center, so I'm not going to worry about that. This definitely needs to be cut out to make room for the air to come through. So this is definitely getting cut out. I'm going to be cutting out the corners here, and hopefully it'll button right up and fit just like stock. All right, so now it's time to route from the throttle body down through the floor here, this ledge, and go down into the 2.5 inch on the intercooler. We're gonna take care of this side of the charge air first. The other side is going to be more difficult because it's got the 2 turbos going into the 1 pipe, and we have to fabricate that custom as well. So let's take a look and see how we can get from that butterfly through this already existing, very cool looking 3-inch tube from I think it's from VRSF, I'm not sure exactly, but a lot of the tubing and routing has already been added here and incorporated for us. There is a map sensor there, which is awesome. Or I think that's the T-map sensor, I'm not sure. But regardless, we do need to make some modifications to this to get it to fit. We need to make some modifications to the chassis, like that bracket right there for the cruise control needs to go. So let's start doing some of that stuff first so we can get this thing to fit the way that we want it to fit, and then we figure out where we need to make our modifications. So I basically drilled out all the rivet nuts here on this, except this guy, but that's all that all can be done later. I installed the charge air tube as far as I can go. There's actually a big circlip that goes in there, and I got to figure out how to acquire one because it didn't come with this when I got the car and the engine from the customer. So I need to figure out how to get one, but it is pushed in as far as it can go, and it lines up. It basically rotates like this for now. And now I know exactly where it can fit. Now there are no interferences as it stands right now, which is great. But this tube here is facing in the wrong direction because, again, it was intended to go down in between the radiator and the compressor. That's not happening. Here we're going to take it and we're going to be routing it straight down there. So I wanted to figure out a better way to go down below and up. So that's exactly what I'm going to be doing on both of this. And it's also going to make the engine bay cleaner, which is the overall goal here, is to have a really nice, clean looking shaved engine bay. So that's going to help contribute to that. So to finish up here, I think that what I need to do is I need to cut this tube right here. I need to find a new location to put the blow-off valve, and then I need to plumb it down below. Quick 1-minute explanation. So I cut the 3-inch intake charge air tube. I've got what's called a hump hose connector, which allows for a little bit of give from one hard line to another hard line. You slip that over there like that. This guy will get modified, and I will be welding another 3-inch tube onto that to get that to sit just like that somehow. Okay, so that it's going to fit just like that. Then I'm going to have a 3-inch to 2.5-inch reducer elbow go through the wall, the floor there, and that's going to go through and down under to a modified pipe that's going to then go into that and go straight into the intercooler. Wow, I actually did it in 47 seconds. Modifying this is pretty easy. All you got to do is cut and rebead, and it's exactly the same as it was before. I do have a 3-inch line here that I need to cut as well. That is going to end up getting inserted into here, and then that's going to get welded onto this guy because I am not going to recreate these welds on the blow-off valve. I actually really like these welds. I think I'm going to actually repaint it, but it's going to end up getting welded to this guy and then sewn into there so that this guy just sits really nice and freely right like that. So it appears that this whole time I was welding with the wrong rod, the wrong tungsten rod. Previously I was using a gray rod, which was essentially a mix of serrated, lanthanated, yttrium, and others. And it's a general purpose rod, but it's really not very good for welding aluminum in AC. I moved to a thoriated rod, which is the red rod. It's got a little bit of, radioactive elements, but who cares, as long as you're wearing the correct, safety equipment, right? But that's what the welds were like with the thoriated rod. The red rod was amazing. Yes, it worked out much better than that. Terrible, terrible. Yes, much, much better. So from here on out, I'm going to use the right rod for the right job, and I'm not sure if I want to redo this, but I definitely think it needs to be revisited in one way, shape, or form. I decided to just deep six this whole idea. I did not like the welds. I didn't like the fitment. It didn't look right. So what I did is I took the blow-off valve off of this guy. I recut it, I reshaped it, and I made a new 3-inch tube. I put a bead on one end. This guy's gonna sit up on top of there. I'm gonna weld around this bead, and I'm gonna be done with that side of the charge pipe. I gotta do the other side next, but I wanted to just let you guys know that I decided to go a different route. That was not the quality that I would have expected out of myself. I was disappointed, so I wanted to start over and try to do this the right way. The nice, clean welds, good adhesion, and I really wanted to just do this a different way. So hopefully that I don't mess it up by redoing it, but this is my only chance, and hopefully it'll work.
For the record.
Get this one thing clear.
This tube is now ready for install right here, and we're gonna fit everything up and see how it all looks.
Get this one thing. Get this one thing
All right, now comes the hard part. I struggled a lot with the welding on this, but that's okay. I learned a little bit, and I need to improve because I'm going to be doing a lot of welding on this side. This is going to be the hardest part of the swap, in my opinion, is getting the charge air from each of the two turbos without interference, come up, snake, go down. This is where it gets easy. It's the part where you got both of the aluminum tubes going into one. I'm going to try to use as much as I can from this guy, and I'm going to be cutting and I'm going to basically cut off a lot of this stuff, but I'm going to try to reuse as much of it as I can and repair whatever I can to get it to work. But yeah, this is 1.5-inch tube, this is 2.5-inch tube, and I'm going to be using as much as I possibly can and recreate what I need in order to get this to fit. Now, the mode of thinking that I'm taking here, the avenue that I want to go, is similar to the other side where I want it to snake up and come through. When it comes through, it needs to go to somewhere right around here, I'm thinking, but I have to be careful about where I route my charge air because then I won't have room for the air intake for the front turbo. The rear turbo is going to be really tight along the rear firewall. I could figure that out. The front turbo is going to be a little bit more complicated because I need to figure out where the air is going to be coming in, where my air box is going to be, and how that's going to interfere with the charge air. And I don't really know how I'm going to do that yet. Which is not what I want. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to trim this guy right at the high point, the peak there. So I'm going to cut that. And as far as the front turbo goes, I want to use this still, right? I want to use this. I'm going to cut this off right there, and I'm going to weld a new piece on because ultimately I want this to fit kind of like that. So there's going to be a piece that comes from here over to here, and I might actually use a rubber, whatever, kind of like a rubber hose. That's the word I was looking for, hose. And this guy here will be probably cut like, maybe like right there, and then it'll go right into the turbo. So this guy will need to be modified, and then this one will need to be somehow hosed, or maybe I'll use like a 1-inch silicone hose with a heat shield over it. That's probably what I'll end up doing. That might be the easiest thing to do. But what will allow me is that this part here will then go essentially right here, right in the front, and then it'll go straight through a, you know, like a 2.5 inch to 2.5 inch elbow, and then it'll go right into the intercooler. I think that's what I want to end up doing. I think that's going to be the easiest way to route this. I don't have to worry about making a new T or anything like that. I just need to focus on one over the other. So I cut up most of these pipes, and this guy's secured in the back turbo, and the front turbo, we got a couple of pieces here. I already cut everything up, as you can see. I have this resting on a rag to kind of estimate where I think the position is going to end up being, because I want it to float, obviously. But this guy's going to be easy, right? This is just going to be a silicone tube. And this one here is going to be a bit more challenging because that will require some detailed welding. I think I might move this back a little bit more. But I did cut this guy up. This is the flange that goes into the turbo. And if I were to place that here, right, and I got a couple of pipes that I was able to scavenge from this assembly, actually. I cut it up and I'm repurposing them, actually. And I want to figure out where the position is going to be that's going to actually bring this guy out and go right into there, essentially. Tacked up, and the front turbo, this is basically the front turbo piece here. Okay, I got 1 piece, 2 piece, 3 piece, 4. And it fits perfectly into the front turbo, right? And if I rotate this, I'm not hearing or feeling, more importantly, any interferences. I think I'm going to end up wanting to keep it right there. Now, as you can see, let me see if I can reposition this here. The rear turbo is going to be a little bit more challenging, right? I think I might want to weld onto that tube and basically bump it up over the frame rail so that it has a much better shot to the inlet of the collector. But this guy is going to go snake right down through there and into the intercooler. So I think that I actually have a solution here, which is awesome. I got a couple of spare tubes here to play with to get this guy to line up, but I think it should be okay. So I got it welded, got it tacked up at least, and it is in place on the rear turbo. The front turbo is also set up in place. It can rotate freely without obstruction. The only thing that I really need to do is I need to get a 1.5 inch silicone 135. I don't think I can bend an actual tube. I think it'll kink too much. But I also need to, you know, kind of cut off this part of the frame rail and just sand it down flat in that location so that it can go through. But this is the way it is on the actual N54, is that they're connected with a rubber coupling here, which I actually had here before. Here's a rubber coupling that was intended to go on there. I'm just going to be reinserting it, but in a slightly different fashion. That would allow this to go here, and I'm not going to say the rest is history because I still need to do some more work. Now let's get at drilling through here and connecting to here. Now that we've maintained clearance on our charge pipe and it's set in its location that we want, we got to figure out how we're going to connect A through here to B. I've got a couple of ideas. That includes a hump hose, which allows for any type of misalignment in your hoses, which is probably going to end up happening. And that's okay. It's not a big deal. That's why they invented these things. And that's going to come straight from here over. I'm not gonna put too much pressure on here because of the because of the welds are still tacked on. It's gonna come down through here, over through here, and into a coupler. So I need to figure out where I'm gonna end up drilling my 3-inch pass-through hole, probably a very similar location as on the driver's side. And I wanna use a couple of couplers in order to affix them all together. So let's figure out where we need to drill our hole. And you know what, I'm just gonna do this all in time lapse because I've already explained it on the one side. I'm not gonna explain it again on this side. You can see what I need to do and you can figure out how to make it work in time lapse only. So enjoy. Okay guys, that just about does it here. Let's go through the entire intercooler routing. From this one rear turbocharge pipe, it's going to go through a 1-inch hose, which is then going to go to the collector. The collector also connects the first turbo, which is right there. It is secured in place, and as you move this, you'll see that there are no physical interferences on the collector, which then goes through a 2.5-inch coupler down to a 2.5-inch 90, to another 2.5-inch coupler, to another 90 coupler, intercooler, which is isolator mounted, coupler, 2.5-inch 90, 2.5-inch to 3 reducer, and then a 3-inch tube that goes to my blow-off valve, to a hump hose to allow for some slop, charge air into the intake manifold. So guys, that just about does it for the entire intercooler charge air setup. My name is Frank Macaluso from Garageaholic. Tell your friends. Why? Because it's simple. I just want more subscribers, and I want more comments. And I want more people to learn and tell me that they've actually learned something from watching my videos, that they can do this stuff with common handheld, and power tools. Doesn't take a genius to do this stuff. Hopefully, you've learned something by subscribing to my channel. And that's why, please tell your friends. Comment, like, love the comments, guys. Thank you so much for participating. Anyway, I am out of here. E30 N54, next video, I don't know what it's going to be or when, but it's going to happen soon. All right, guys, thank you so much for watching, and take it easy. Later.